Welcome to the latest FuturePrint webinar. Really happy to have you with us. And we're tackling a topical and interesting and highly innovative segment within the print industry. This webinar is entitled Predictions that are shaping the future of robotics in print. And it is partly predictions and it's partly a glimpse into the future, but also it's a look at real life robotics as well. Um, Once again, welcome. Happy to introduce Mark Boyt from Keypoint Intelligence, Principal Analyst.
Hi,
Um,
Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Mark's done some fantastic research and insights to draw upon to get us moving into this session. And Grant Copson joins us from Cyan Tech. Welcome to the webinar, Grant.
Hi, everyone.
Grant delivered one of the most popular talks at our recent FuturePrint Industrial Print in Munich, and I've been working with robotics for how long now? About 15 years?
Yeah, around that, yeah.
Yeah, so you're almost a granddad in the robotics world then, Grant. Yeah, fantastic. So I mean, this webinar really comes at I think a timely moment. I don't know if anybody would have noticed the news of the weekend. Robotics competed in a half marathon in Beijing this past Sunday, according to the BBC, with the fastest machine leaving its human rivals for dust. The winning robot was called Lightning and developed by Chinese smartphone maker Honor, and it finished the race in 50 minutes and 26 seconds, according to race organisers. And Mark, you've got a point there related to the
Yeah,
previous year. But what's
no, exactly.
yeah,
So this, in fact, was the second edition of the race. So last year there was about 20 robots that competed, and in fact only six finished. And in that time, the winning time was about 2 hours 40. So in fact, a lot slower than the runners. And in fact, a lot of the runners were actually slowing down to watch the robots as they went past. So this time, as you said, that's a massive transition to now go from 2 hours 40 to 50 minutes in that distance. Yeah, that just shows you how rapidly humanoid robots is developing and their durability. It was interesting when you watched it last time, it was almost like watching a Formula One race. There were lots of pit stops. They were taking the robots off to the side to change the batteries, do oil changes, trying to get them back on the race. This time, 40% were running autonomously. And yeah, it just shows you, say, how rapidly robotics is progressing.
absolutely. So the human world record is held by Uganda's Jacob Kiplimo with 57 minutes 27 seconds. So it's already miles ahead. 40% of the robots raced autonomously, which is quite incredible, isn't it? The rest were remotely controlled. That must have been quite stressful for the remote controller, I reckon. But nobody mentioned it's slightly cheaty, isn't it? Robots are going to eventually win and going to be more efficient. No need for hydration, lower risk of injury, etc. And I've never seen I doubt a robot will ever need to do yoga to recover. Print could be accused of being a little hesitant off the blocks, though, can't it, really? This could be as simple as literally a natural result of many factors, I suppose. And Mark's analysis will paint a nice picture there. And it could be really to do with the diffusion of innovation. Industries adopt new technologies at different time. So a terrible echo. I'll put this onto microphone. Hopefully that's better. I've probably got a special effect that I didn't realize I pressed on my microphone. I've put back to the computer now. But yeah, the diffusion of innovation. So different industries really sort of adopt technologies in waves. And historically, print perhaps is not so much of an innovator-led sector when it comes to automation. There are different elements, aren't there? So fragmentation, it's SME driven, it's capital sensitive, and it's operationally diverse. And that may make some kind of difference, really. And if we consider the Gartner hype cycle, maybe on the positive note, the print industry, robotics in print, may have skipped that hype. So expectations may therefore remain a little bit more grounded. And I wonder also if adoption has been driven less by hype and perhaps more by necessity now. And at this point, I'm not going to say any more about it really, because Mark, you've done all the work. I don't want to steal your glory. So over to you, and I hope I'm not echoey now.
I think there's a message coming through saying there is still some echo. So maybe everyone going on mute whilst I guess I'm presenting might help, I guess. But maybe if someone could just feedback, everything okay now in the chat? I'm assuming. Okay. So brilliant. So thank you, Marcus, for setting it up. I think you're absolutely right. There's been a slowness to it, but the reality, of course, is what we all know today is there's a lot of pressures on printers. When you think about what keeps most of us awake at night, it's certainly rising costs, labor challenges, the changing nature of print, shorter and shorter runs, etc. All of that is putting a lot of challenge into the whole flow. Now, the good news, of course, is there's technologies around that are clearly helping us. One of those has been AI, and AI has really come through as sort of a turbo boost to automation. But clearly what that's doing is affecting what I would call the digital flow, the flow of that job coming in and through the pre-press processes, etc. But print obviously has very much a physical flow alongside that. When you think about it, there's a lot of media movement throughout the process, whether that's from the warehouse to the production floor, through the presses, into finishing, of course, and then ultimately out at the back end. So there's a lot of paper movements, media movements throughout that process. And today, these are quite often bottlenecks, or at least places where it slows down, where manual labor has to take those challenges. So that's what really robotics is all about, is going beyond AI, which is helping us automate the automation, the digital side, and really bringing that whole helping hand to the overall process. Now, what's interesting is when you think about what type of robots that could be, there's a whole variety of different robots out there that are designed to do various functions. And just to simplify that, we can definitely see robotic arms. Things are great at lifting and moving into a particular place. So these are great for loading and unloading devices. Then you've got the autonomous vehicles. I think of these as sort of intelligent pallet trucks. Independently can go off, grab the media, bring it to the press, move it on, etc. And then, of course, you've also got the potential of humanoid. And as we've just been describing, they are moving on at a pace, getting much faster, more durable, more capable. So potentially what we see is when you think about all of those different media movements throughout the print production process, is a variety of these robots will have roles to play at different areas. So the good news is there's plenty of capability out there. Now, what we did last summer was did a survey. We started to ask the first questions about where robotics are, what printers were thinking, where they were in their journey. And it surprised us that actually the indication was a lot of rapid growth last year. So off the back of that, we decided to do a lot more in-depth survey this year to try and find out more about that, what the reality is, etc. So let me start with those underlying figures in terms of anticipation of growth. And we asked this in two ways. The first one is, are you considering deploying robots in your business? And what you can see here is 50% said they were actively looking at robots, which means they're aware, they can see some interest, they can see some value, and it's on their radar as something they should be looking at as part of their business. And on top of that, another 34% said they were certainly considering it for the future. So again, all of this validates awareness and interest. And then on the right-hand side, we got a bit more into specifics and said, when you actually expecting to purchase this robot? And what you can see here is this 13% saying they're actively looking at buying one now. And then you've got another 30% here saying within the year. And then you've got this one over here, 44% saying within 1 to 3 years. So effectively saying almost 90% of those that were interviewed said that they were looking at buying a robot within the next 3 years. That is a huge acceleration of robotics. So clearly then you need to get into those questions of why. Why are people looking at these? What are the value they're seeing? What are their expectations? So this question was really asking, again, what's your primary motivation? So very important to note here that there were one answer they could give. And the one that dominated, 22%, was automate. So they're thinking about the value they can bring to their workflow and the productivity improvements that adding a robot into those flows could do. But what you can also see, in fact, is there's a long spread of other choices. that gets into solving labor issues, etc. But what this also shows is there's a wide reasons and a wide set of values that robots can certainly bring to bear in the print industry, whether it's addressing issues or driving their business forward more productive. Of course, we asked where would they think they would put those robots, where are the bottlenecks, where are the areas they would think they'll add real value. And what's interesting is almost fairly similar numbers in terms of production floor, shipping, and in the finishing. And again, when you ask where the real physical bottlenecks are, they are identified in that same way. So they're very much aligning with those needs. We also asked, okay, so if you do put robots in, what do you expect will be the benefits, the payback from those? And what's interesting here is this is where almost the link to labor challenges comes in, because what they're seeing is that the knock-on effect of putting robots onto their floor is actually they can help their workers actually enjoy work, do the work they want to do better, with that significant number returning to their primary roles. What I should have said is, when we ask them about labor challenges, what are they doing? One of the primary reactions is they get their workers to do multiple things. So the guy that's running the press is also the one that has to look after other activities, etc. So they stretch their people a little bit thinner. So by putting robots in, what they're actually allowing their people to do is to go back to where they add real value, the bits of work that they really want to do, their focus, their primary activities where they add that real value. And this one I liked as well. Reinvest in new staff. That idea of not only is it actually helping those people, but also potentially gives them some savings that they can reinvest into their business. So the next question then was really about, okay, so what is it that's going to get you to adopt robotics sooner? If you like, the triggers, what are the triggers that are going to get you to make that final decision? And what's interesting here is, as you can see, there's a number that sort of stand out at the top. The biggest one here is about understanding how robots will be integrated into their system. So it's really showing that there's these big questions of, okay, I see the value of the movement, but I really want to get into the detail of how it's going to work, how it's going to be fitting with what I'm doing, what cost savings it's really going to deliver. And also this very, very important one in terms of space optimization. We know that a lot of printers are cramming a lot of equipment in. So when you start to think about where will robots play, one of the key questions is, do I need to adjust my flow, my workspace, etc., to allow them to function properly? And that, again, may be where the humanoid come in, because if we can work in there, then theoretically humanoid can work in that same space. So these are key areas in terms of what would help them move faster towards robotics. Actually, what I've realized is I jumped a couple of slides there, so sorry. So one of the things back to is, what do they expect to come out of robotics? And that's the bit about getting their people back to their primary roles, etc. But the triggers, so this is the key question, was the trigger. So there's the top 5 stand out. 3 of them I think are linked, which is that logic of the cost of labor, it keeps on rising. But their expectation is the cost of robotics will come down, or effectively they'll get to a point where they cross over. And that's where that return on investment magic point happens, where it becomes a very logical business decision, therefore, to invest in robotics. The other 2 are very interesting in terms of workflow automation completed, which is almost that logic of I need to get my production flow effectively organized and structured first, because that's the way in which robotics are truly going to fit best and really drive my business forward. And the one at the top, competition investing. And I think there's this element here of printers by their nature, I think, like to, or rather prefer not to be the first to do something. But if they see the competitors, their competitors investing and benefiting from it, I think that will become the wave, the catalyst to really driving more of them to make those decisions and invest in robotics. So as I said, all of this really adds up to the reality that I think robots are really on the cusp. They're going to move very fast. Just as we talked about the humanoid accelerating, I think we're going to see that same acceleration in terms of printers now investing in robotics to add real value and automation to their business.
Thanks, Mark. That's fantastic. And that research is fresh, isn't it? Something you've done over the past few weeks and months.
Yep, it's only just been published. Yeah.
And if you were to get a copy of it, to contact you directly, we can let everybody have your details after the session.
We can. We haven't actually made it available yet, but by all means, contact me and we will.
Well, they can talk to you. People can
Yes,
talk to you about the research and what you
absolutely.
and so on. A couple of questions for you. Why is productivity the main driver? Could you actually could you stop screen sharing?
Yeah, that's probably the best thing, isn't it? Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
quick question. Why is productivity the main driver?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, and the first thing I would say, I was delighted when I saw that, because for me, that's a very positive statement that actually investing in robots is really about the future. It's about driving my business forward. It's putting it on a much firmer footing, etc., and the value that represents. I think there is clearly an element here also of the labor challenges in terms of the issues that they're having to deal with, and they'll certainly come through as well, as you saw in terms of the payback. That will certainly alleviate some of those problems. But it's almost a win-win situation, isn't it? Productivity drives my business forward. It allows me to generate more revenue, more opportunity. But if I can also solve my underlying challenges with labor and actually put myself into a much stronger structure going forward, then I build a platform for growth, which is really what that productivity statement, I think, indicates.
Very good. You have a question here about the from Nigel about Nigel Williams. What was the sample target in the survey? Was it focused on print in general, industrial print, or large format print?
Good question. I should have said that right from the start. So the survey, actually, we try to go as wide as possible. About half of the respondents self-identified as commercial printers, and then you got a whole smattering in there of book printers, photo printers, garment printers, etc. So we really try to get a wide spectrum of printers identified in here. And again, similar in terms of size. And what I'm showing you, by the way, was the European data. There was a similar survey done in the US. Yeah.
Okay. Any differences? Any major differences in the results?
There are I mean, what's interesting is the growth expectations actually were pretty aligned. So this expectation of the rapid growth was happening on both sides of the Atlantic. There's always a few interesting ones that jump out. It's interesting the primary motivation from the US did surprise me, because that was almost about alleviating labor issues in terms of safety was one of their primary reasons, which is a little bit different to productivity. And maybe not quite what I would maybe expect, but it does show, as I was trying to indicate in there, in terms of those needs and priorities, there's quite a spectrum of variety there. Yeah.
I wonder if policy influences that as well in certain parts of the US in terms of health and safety. And anyway,
well, legal issues potentially of
litigation
and what have you can also be a key element. Yeah.
Another question for you. What is the tipping point for investment? Give us
Yeah, so it's interesting. I sort of mentioned that in terms of those three elements that came up, which is the cost of labor rising to a point where it's really difficult to manage the rising costs, and the cost of robot rather coming down. For me, that's a really interesting tipping point. We want to be able to monitor that, etc., and see how we can track that to see that change. To me, though, probably the biggest tipping point is going to be that point that came out about competitiveness. And I think the real tipping point is when robots really start to flow and there's a realization by others that haven't invested yet that they are falling behind. I think that's that real point of acceleration. But I think the first thing is the truth is what's going to drive that tipping point, I think, is more awareness of what robots can do. I think that's why this session is so important, is to get that message out there that the technology is there, the capability there, the needs there. And actually the use of robotics is growing. And I think that will encourage and drive further utilization.
Obviously, you mentioned a few of the respondent sections there. Nigel's just asked, anyone that's in more ahead of any others? Because I know Grant's going to cover more the industrial space. So, is commercial in front of wide format, or wide format in front of?
Well, I'll go back and validate this, but I would say my expectation would be that wide format is probably further ahead in terms of when I think of what robots are truly available in the print industry today. One of those areas where we see a number is certainly the loading and unloading of wide format presses. So I think that's probably the area that's most ahead. I think the finishing area is not too far behind, but that can be in both commercial and elsewhere. So
Okay.
I would say wide format is probably the furthest ahead at the moment.
And just the final one, what's holding back adoption? Is it fear of the unknown? Because it can't be that the technology doesn't work. It can't be that maybe the technology isn't, is it hugely expensive? I don't know. What's holding back?
Well, it's interesting because we did ask the question, why haven't you bought a robot to date? And the number one response that was capital expenditure. So then you start to link that with other questions in there where there's a lot around return on investment and better understanding of what that would be. And to me, that's the key point. When you understand what the robot can truly do and you can measure the return on investment, then reality, it becomes a real business decision. And it's almost, yes, it's the right investment to get that payback. But to me, what is still needed, there's a gap that I'm seeing from this research that says the printers have an awareness and an interest, but in reality, the industry providing the necessary input, the data, the visibility of robots is not there yet. So the industry, I think, has a role to rise up, the vendors that is, to rise up and be more open and share and build out their portfolios of the different robots that can truly address the needs across the print production flow.
The point you're making there, is it because the print industry hasn't been on the robotics industry's radar?
Well, there's two sides to it, I guess, is you're right. When you think about the two potential suppliers, the robotic companies could come into the print market, or the existing print vendors could add robotics into their portfolio. So there's sort of two ways I think this can be addressed. If you think about the robotic companies, I'm interested to get Grant's view on this in a minute as well, is when they think of the different verticals they could go after, print is not the obvious one for them. There's other verticals which are more receptive today, more progressive. Automotive is an historical one, but you're seeing a lot of other ones now really adopting rapidly robotics. So print at the moment is not on their radar. I've been to a number of robotics shows and had those conversations, and yeah, it's not there yet. So I think that's what the print industry needs to do again, is to make sure the robotics market is aware that they are open for business and looking at it. But that's also where I see the print vendors have a role to play, which is also then to integrate robotics into their portfolio and make them more available, open those conversations. A good example would be that one about the space in terms of allocations and needs. Printers today absolutely need to think about what they need to do to get their production floor ready for robotics. Even if they're not quite ready to buy, they need to think about that. That takes a while to adjust, to move things, etc. So that should be an open conversation in the industry today about how to get robot ready.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Mark. You're going to stay online, aren't you? And we're going to have a little
Absolutely.
bit of a wrap-up chat at the end. Thank you for that. Grant, over to you. Give us a bit of an intro about yourself and Cyan Tec while I work out how to put your slides on.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah, so I'm Grant Copson from Cyan Tec Systems. I've worked for Cyan Tec for getting towards 16 years, working with a very similar team throughout that period of time. So we've got a lot of experience in designing and manufacturing automated systems, specializing in industrial inkjet systems, which is obviously a key topic for today, but we also specialize in high power laser systems. So we're not talking small manually operated laser stations. We're often talking quite big, physically big installations, but also where it's smaller standalone equipment, it would be in quite often the multi-kilowatt laser applications. And the other strand of our business is very generic and hard to market and hard to promote because it's in such a wide range of different industries and different applications, but industrial automation and robotics. So that can be from machine tending to loading and unloading of applications to testing, leak testing, electrical test equipment. There's a wide range of areas that covers, but it's fair to say both in industrial automation, in the high power laser systems, and in industrial inkjet systems, robotics play a key part in all areas of our business now, and that has grown over the last decade. You know, we've always integrated robots since I've been involved, but the number of robots compared to the number of systems that we would do per year is getting closer. So most of our new applications, so a robot is certainly considered at the proposal stage. So yeah, so just a bit of company context really. We're based in Leicester, in the Midlands in the UK, and they're the two buildings that we're showing there in the photos are our two manufacturing plants. So the one on the left is our sort of our headquarters, our original factory, and we've got a new factory on the right hand side for expansion. So yeah, we're a company that's growing in all of those three spaces.
Fantastic.
So this just gives you a rough idea of the type of companies that we're working with. We're working with a lot of global brands, helping them to improve all of the things really that Mark was talking about, especially productivity, but also quality. So helping various customers that are shown there to improve the quality of their product, which is extremely important. And yeah, again, like Mark said, the key area that we've got to get away from is that robotics aren't replacing people in these applications, where we're bringing robots in to do some of the automated processes, whether that's quality control checking or improving speed. Often it gives people an opportunity to be redeployed in added value areas within the business. So that's quite a key area that we have to address with our customers, and when we start to engage with the engineering level within these businesses, because that can be quite a sensitive area. So yeah, so we're working with a lot of global brands in a real wide range of different industries. And this just gives an example really of the type of applications that we're getting involved in, and how broad our business is. So when we're trying to target new areas, it can be quite difficult. And I think on reflection and having spoken to Mark quite a bit over the last few weeks, the data that Mark's presenting and future data will be very useful for us to be able to analyze where we should be targeting the next set of opportunities. So yeah, you can see on there, and all of those applications are products that we have built machines that are related to that project. So for example, the running shoe for on running, I'll show you a video a little bit later. The vertical aircraft, we've just installed a number of machines into their factory for their first production. So all of those applications are live applications that we've worked on.
Great.
So in terms of industrial inkjet using robotics, it's a very broad sector and a lot of different components, going from this type of automotive application where we're applying a piano black hard coat for products that are in areas that are often touched by the driver, the passenger, when they're in the vehicle, to also coating external products on a car that needs added protection. So yeah, we've got, if you go to the next slide, Marcus, there's a video showing this. So this is in our lab where we are proving process, and we're actually printing onto an automotive center console component. And the key element here is, in a typical spraying application where our customer is spraying quite an expensive material, but also a material that needs to be extracted from the area that we're spraying in, there'd be an awful lot of waste. So approximately the customer is able to save about 80% of waste material by using inkjet rather than a spraying process. You've also got the added benefit of this type of application where you don't need to mask off areas that you don't want to be inkjetted, with the coated. Whereas in a spray application, it's nowhere near as precise, so you have to often mask. So there's various advantages to using inkjet in this type of application. So this is a very complex piece of automation that has inkjet technology integrated into it, but this is much more like a lot of our what we would call traditional automated systems that we've designed for the automotive industry, for example. So we're automatically feeding components via bespoke feeding systems. So an operator would load product into the machine manually, and then from there, the process is fully automated. And this machine is very flexible in the fact that it can accommodate a wide range of different components, to the level where it's not variants of a component, they are actually different components that we are processing. So that adds a lot of complication to the process in terms of automating it. But in terms of the inkjet technology, yeah, we're inkjet printing onto medical vials, but we're automatically loading, treating, printing, and unloading. So it's a fully automated process. So really, we're trying to give here a good example of how, people that are listening today and watch back in the future, of how they can potentially automate their applications, and using robotics in combination with inkjet technology. Okay, so the next application is printing onto bottles, a much higher speed application, which adds some complications into the automation that we're providing. This is marking onto washing detergent caps, and it's printing a white onto a bottle cap. So if you go to the next slide, please, Marcus, it's got this is the video of this application. So it's processing 4 bottle caps at a time. We're pre-treating using a plasma system. We're printing onto the bottles, and then we're UV curing the print. So again, a relatively high speed application. So the automation that we integrate there in terms of the feed system and doing the analysis pre-design really on how we're going to design each station to keep up with the takt time of the application. A relatively low cost item. So that's a serious consideration in terms of giving our clients a good return on investment. That's all part of our proposal stage of putting together a concept and giving a customer a cost for a bespoke machine like this. This machine's been designed for the client, whereas some of the others that we'll show in a minute are more modular and standard based. So yeah, that's a very interesting application for inkjet. So this is printing onto tokens. So typically tokens used at sort of festivals is a good example. So using like beer tokens, where the company that are running the festival want the money all in one place, so they give out tokens. So this is printing onto both sides of the token, and the alignment from one side to the other is critical to our customer. So we've designed and manufactured all in-house at Cyan Tec a mechanism that is able to control the token once it's been printed on one side, flipping it over, keeping it in a known position so we can do the print on the other side. So that's the rotary turning mechanism there that's shown in the video, and then the tokens are processed through the second print stations. And that's a machine that we're currently building a second version of as well, which is always a benefit to Cyan Tec, because we often make a machine once and then we move on to the next application because it's dedicated to a particular customer. So yeah, that's printed an awful lot of tokens on the first machine, and like I say, they've got a second one on its way. So this has been a revolutionary piece of equipment really for us. We've manufactured 25 systems to this point for this particular client. This is printing onto the next high performance running shoe for the relatively well-known brand, very well-known brand On. So we're using a robot to manipulate the product underneath the industrial inkjet heads. So we've got a full color CMYK and white system. So when they change the substrate from white to another color, we can print white graphics. A robot that is exactly the same as this in terms of its reach and payload is actually used to manufacture the shoe in the previous process. So the shoe is plasma treated only in the areas where we're going to print, which is unique to each design of graphics. It's then printed and then UV cured. But like I say, each shoe can be a different design. That's the big benefit of having an industrial inkjet machine against its competitors such as pad printing, screen printing. It's digital, it's on the fly. The customer scans, we scan the barcode on the top of the tooling that holds the shoe, the last, and that tells our machine the size of the shoe, the orientation of the shoe, right or left, and what graphics we want to print and with the locations of those graphics. So that's a very good marketing tool for us to show off the true capabilities of printing onto 3D objects. So that's showing the video again, Marcus.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So from a bespoke machine or to a modular or even a standard machine, which is the dream really, but even a modular machine, it has a lot of benefits to both a machine builder like Cyan Tec, an integrator, and also the end customer, because the machine it's a proven concept. The customer can come and see it working at Cyan Tec's factory. So the actual getting the robot print into market is a smoother process. It's much easier to onboard clients is the idea of a modular or a standard machine. So just some key points there really. We've got a plasma pre-treatment station, a robot to load and unload the product and obviously move it around the various stations. We've got UV pinning and final curing within that system. And it's modular in the fact that we can add and remove stations dependent on the customer's requirements. So we can have a manual load station, we can have an automated load station, or we can have both, depending on how the customer wants to run the machine. We can have full color or we can have single color. We can have 600 DPI, 300 DPI, 150 DPI, depending on how we want to set up each print station. So we can have different pre-treatment stations, plasma, corona, heat treatment, etc. So we've got a lot of flexibility within that platform, but the power really of the modular system is to be able to try and launch this to a wider audience and start to, like I said, use Mark's data to work out where does this machine fit, which sectors, which particular customers are looking to invest in robotics to improve their productivity, their overall output, their health and safety, managing the health and safety risks, all of these elements. That's links back to Mark's data really as to where are these systems going to be best deployed. So just an example of the final product again. So
brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that.
Brilliant, Grant. And it's quite varied, isn't it? So you're working in lots of different industries. And like you say, it's kind of working out which ones are going to take on board robotics or be receptive to it. As Mark said, some of the traditional printing sector seems to be a little slow and reluctant, or hesitant, maybe a better word. I think those barriers seem to be coming down now. Just think, Grant, in terms of your talk, which sectors or which applications seem to deliver the fastest ROI for robotics?
Yeah, so I think like I touched on there, I think the fastest ROI is if we can get a modular system rather than a bespoke system to fit the application, because in that instance we can normally drive the cost down, which is obviously always a big factor in terms of somebody investing into such a system, but also the time to deployment from when a customer can actually get that in the factory and start earning its keep as such. So I think the more that we can modularize the design of whether it's a single pass desktop printer to the robotic machine that I just showed you there, I think the more we can modularize that and standardize it, the better.
And it sounds like from what you say, the best results are taken when it's strategic. It's at the first port of call when somebody's thinking about what they may need. It's a strategic investment really focused on the problem in hand and the opportunity that robotics allied with print can deliver, right?
Yeah, we're often in at the very early stage in the fact that some of our customers are even still designing the product that's going to be using robotics, whether that's using inkjet or other technologies. And that's a very good point for companies like Cyan Tec to be involved in a project, because sometimes some products are not designed to be automated because of the engineers that are designing those are designing for the product rather than to actually manufacture it in serious volume. So that's also the time of involvement of an integrator like Cyan Tec is quite critical in the process, but that's why it's important for us to talk to a wider audience to make people aware of what's actually available, and the type of offering that Cyan Tec's got to share.
I'm sure there's some sort of standard sort of across industry patterns that you see, but is there any, how do requirements sometimes differ across applications?
Yeah, so I think the key areas would be the geometry of the actual product that we're processing. That can vary incredibly, but in physical size, but also in shape, and in design, which we have to obviously take into account. I think the materials, when we're talking about inkjet, because that determines the architecture of the machine, the actual product materials that we need to pre-treat, that we need to print on, and we need to cure. So that's very upfront, very early on in a project. That's their key areas that we need to determine. And also the methodology of how products are introduced to a machine and also how they're removed from the machine. And again, that's often discussed at quite an early stage.
What are some of your typical integration challenges that you tend to face when you're kind of early on in the phase with a customer, or even that you're talking to them about the concept of investing?
Yeah, so I think the part geometry again can be a challenge. Certainly with presenting a part to an inkjet head. The cost pressure can be quite high in terms of we're working often with some quite low cost products. So we're often tasked with producing a machine at quite a low cost because of the the product that's being processed. And I think it's also the other challenge really is onboarding new people that are new to automation and managing their expectations. I think that's almost one of the critical areas of our, if you call it sort of consultation phase before it's actually a live project. That expectation management is quite important, and that's from the experience of our commercial team that would sort of guide the customer. Some customers have an awful lot of experience in automation, and Mark touched on the automotive sector. You know, robotics have been fundamental in that industry for an awful long, for decades. Whereas in industrial inkjet, a lot of our customers don't have that experience. So that's where we're trying to guide them. So I think that expectation management is very important.
Yeah, and educating and being their partner, right, and helping
Yeah.
them through the process to de-risk the sense of the unknown, I guess. Bring Mark back into the conversation now. We'll both have a quick chat. Thank you both for your talks, really useful. What is there a difference, or for commercial print, are this a standard robotics solutions? What's better, standard or bespoke robotics? Or
I
is
mean,
it
if I start, it's interesting because I guess what this is demonstrating is the wide capability of robotics, the fact that they can be used in very specific, unique cases, but they can also be used in repetitive, common places. And I guess the big thing that probably varies between those is going to be the cost. But I think the logic is certainly if you take something like loading a press, then theoretically that process should be standardized to be able to standardize the robots, the integration, etc. And therefore, theoretically, the cost will come down. So I think the big difference ultimately is repetitive should result in lower cost for the buyer. But the beauty of bespoke is it means you can address absolutely specific use cases or specific demand and still resolve it with the same, effectively, robotic capability. It's the skill of the integrator to solve that problem. Yeah.
And from what you're saying, Grant, is you've modularized quite a lot of your solution. So it's still customized, but a lot of it is, I guess, reduced in cost because you've made it standardized where you can. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's producing a bespoke machine for a client, but using modular elements. The RoboJet itself, that is a product line. So we have the capability at Cyan Tec to produce them in volume, but using the RoboJet platform to create a bespoke machine using that platform is very different to designing and manufacturing a bespoke machine from nothing. So that's where Mark's touched on there, the cost saving. That's the big driver by modularizing a system like that.
Yeah, brilliant. Mark, how do we shift the perception from replacement to enhancement? I think in a way the kind of watching those robots running in the marathon is sort of humanoid, aren't they? Looking, but actually, robotics is physical AI, isn't it? Really, and so I guess having the human, it's almost it's going to take my job and stuff. How do we shift perception from replacement to enhancement then?
That's really interesting because that's the dialogue in the wider market, isn't it? It's that fear that's generated or put out there. We've seen it with AI; it's going to take everyone's jobs. It's a similar conversation with robotics. What's interesting again from the research is the expectations certainly there are more about freeing up humans to go back to where they really add value. So taking away, I love the expression in the robotic world, the 3Ds, the dull, dangerous, and dirty, where robots play well. If you think about that in the finishing, in the printing, it's that lugging around of the materials, it's the repetitive loading of finishes, etc. That's where robots can really take away those less favorable jobs, if you like, and free human up to go and do where they add value. The human bit's always interesting because the other benefit of robots, I think, is also removing human error. The ability of the robot to be more precise, to do it time and time again, can be a huge benefit in many print processes, removing that human error. So this whole thing about human is interesting, isn't it? We want the human touch, but we want to remove the human error, and that's the world we're trying to get robots to help us with. The point about replacement, I guess, though, is my first point would be, it's not an outcome. It's not a fixed outcome. The robots replace people. It's a decision. And it's a decision, therefore, and that's why I love that answer before about what would you do with some of the cost savings, and a lot of those responses were reinvest in people in other areas of my business. And that to me is this world we're trying to build, where we use robots for their value and their capability, and take those dull, dangerous jobs, etc. But we still rely upon and embrace the human value, the human skill into the process too.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it means, surely it's not long ago we were talking about skill shortages anyway. So is it not plugging a gap that's needed?
Well, absolutely. That's what I meant by the labour challenges right from the start. That's the world we live in, and it's going to get tougher. There's going to be less and less people available to work, desiring to do some of the jobs, etc. So we're going to need robotics to replace those, to take out or replace those, etc. But I say it's what else you can then do with the humans, the other values that you can then embrace inside the business, which go alongside it. But yes, labour shortage is going to be one of the key motivators.
Brilliant. Question a bit more for you, Grant, and chime in as well, Mark. In this, then, what is the role of OEMs versus integrators? So you could go to an OEM and buy robotic solutions, or you could go speak to an integrator. What is the role? Is one right for perhaps massive industry, and one is more right for more specific advanced manufacturing segments, perhaps that you're operating in, Grant? I don't know. It's probably a simple answer, is it?
It's an interesting, the two names that we'd fit under both. Like some people would call us an OEM, other people would call us an integrator. So yeah, they're two terms that are used quite frequently in our space. I guess I don't know whether Mark can chip in on that a bit, but in terms of like an integrator, to me, it's bringing lots of other manufactured components, whether that be, the inkjet heads themselves. We're then designing the print module, the mechanics, the sensing around that print head, and then we're making that into a print engine. So that's what I would say, an integrator. And then obviously we're bringing the robot in, we're bringing the plasma system in, and we're getting all of those systems to work together. So an integrator, is that more on like the bespoke projects? I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily a standard or modular machine builder would be an OEM, and a bespoke machine builder would be an integrator. I think there's a lot of crossover there, but I don't know what Mark's view is from sort of the outside of being an integrator.
Yeah, my expectation would be going forward, there's going to be a lot of integration. I guess the expectation almost is a lot of the robotic companies, in terms of those with the robotic arms, their go-to-market model is that they use system integrators locally to do the deployment, the integration. There's a lot of, if you think about the print process, there's a lot of integration that needs to happen. The commands need to come from the automation software to say bring the paper here now, etc. There's a lot of integration that needs to happen. So part of that is how do you take a generic robotic arm and design it properly to do that function it's required. So there's a certain amount of integration. What we talked about before was when the press vendors get more involved in integrating these into their portfolio, that becomes more of you expect it to be more repetitive, more consistent, and therefore I think that's where the role of the system integrator moves probably more to deployment potentially than trying to create new and bespoke and integrate it afresh each time. So, or I guess we can also see the press vendors may take on those responsibilities themselves and be implementing and installing the robotics. To me, it's still a little bit unclear exactly how it's all going to come together. But my first expectation, I expect it more through collaboration than separate. And then you're going to get into factors of service support. If I'm a printer and my biggest asset, my biggest investment is the press, and the role of the robotics are really to drive that flow to make it all work. The last thing I want is to have potential support issues not to be integrated, etc. The robot to not work and the press not to be able to print. So I want to see some sort of integration, I think, in the service between those, which is why, again, I come back to that collaboration element that I expect in the future.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I can see why, and the work that Cyan Tec does is so sort of helpful and compelling, is that mix of experience and application focus, and with the print intermixed with the robotics is really powerful.
Yep.
Just sort of finalizing really. So I don't have robotics. I'm in a print business. How should I get started? Where do I start?
That's a really good question. I mean, and I come back to, I think we're in an interesting position at this moment where robotics is rising, the awareness and interest is there, but we're not seeing, as I said before, the industry to really rise up and start to make the right information available to help them answer those questions about return on investment. So I guess when we asked the question, who would you talk to? The answer is robotic companies, integrators, press companies. Who would you buy from? At the moment, there's a swing towards more robotics because I think they're being probably more responsive to some of those questions. So to answer your question a little bit differently, would be my ask would be that the press vendors, the print vendors start to be more open about robotics, start to talk about it more. By elevating the conversation, I think we'll start to help the printers understand, again, what's more possible, what the return on investment issues, the space issues, all those things will become sort of open conversation. So then the printers themselves can start to really move and adopt robotics. So from their perspective, I think the first thing they absolutely have to do is to open those conversations, find the people that can help you, and if your press vendor isn't ready yet, then there's plenty of other system integrators like Cyan Tec, etc., which I'm sure will be very happy to help and steer you in the right direction and what's possible.
So they can talk to you a little, Mark, but they can talk to Grant.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the thing with, I can only talk for Cyan Tec, but our sales process is very receptive to, like I said earlier, coming in at an early stage and offering advice. We also have an R&D lab where we can produce samples for people. That's a key part of our sales process. So it's giving us and the customer a feel good factor that we know what we need to treat this product with prior to print. We know that the ink that we need to use to print onto this product, and we know that we can cure it and make it long lasting to meet the customer's desire. So yeah, I think all I could say really from Cyan Tec's point of view is we're very up for the challenge of talking to people with new applications, even if that's in an area where robotics are very new. That's not a concern for us.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks both for joining us. It's been really insightful. I've learned a lot myself. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I just think robotics is going to be a huge opportunity. When you think about the challenges, we said right from the start, labor challenges, rising costs, the drive for automation. We're in a very fortunate place at the moment, I think, with the rise of AI and what capabilities that's bringing to the workflow. And now we've got the opportunity with robotics to really be that final helping hand to really help with the painful lifting of media, etc., through the process. So I think we're now at a place where we've got some great tools to really help us drive automation and really turn this industry in a very interesting automated future.
And what's going to happen next year's Beijing half marathon then?
Well, that's an interesting. They've already beat them.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was maybe if they had the on-running shoes, which already benefits humans,
maybe they'd go
also
much
benefit.
quicker, yeah. Maybe
Exactly.
they'd go much quicker. Yeah, and they wouldn't need, like you said, need to go for a pit stop.
Absolutely. All right. Well, listen, thanks so much, gentlemen. We'll hope to have you back at a FuturePrint event in, I'm sure, Valencia and Munich going forward. So anybody interested in anything FuturePrint, please check out futureprint.tech. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.